speaker series sponsored by Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines. My name is Mark Sengen. I'm the Director of Community Diversity and Education for Capital City Pride, and I am really excited to be here with you all live from my home office in Des Moines on all of our various streams. This month, our speaker series will be a mix of looking back and looking forward, as this tumultuous year has caused a lot of us to reflect on the past, and it's really implored us to ponder the future. And we just want to say thank you for spending a little bit of time with us this evening to get inspired. As we did in June with our last speaker, Jonathan Lovitz, we have invited a former speaker back to share her amazing stories with a new audience and to answer some questions from her perspective. Those of you that are watching via any of our streams, please, we encourage you to submit questions as we move along through the presentation. We may not get to every single one right there in the moment, but we do have time dedicated throughout tonight's presentation for your questions. Now, before I introduce our speaker, there's another individual I'd like to introduce. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Kayana Krivalevi. I'll have Kayana come on the screen. Hey, Kayana.
Hello.
So Kayana works with Capital City Pride on the Community Diversity and Education Committee and will be tonight's co-moderator.
Mm-hmm.
And Kayana, I just want to say thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. All right, so allow me to introduce our guest speaker for this evening. Jen Loeb was born and raised in Jessup, Iowa. She went to Wartburg College, graduated with a degree in biology, and now currently lives in Marengo and works in Cedar Rapids. Jen started mountain climbing in 2010, and since then has climbed mountains all over the world, including Everest in 2016, which we'll hear a lot more about tonight. She's the first woman from Iowa to climb Everest, and she's currently on track to becoming one of less than 25 women in the United States to complete the 7 summits, which is when you climb the highest mountain on every continent. She only has one peak left. Hope to hear a little bit more about this tonight too, and that is Vinson in Antarctica. Now, we will speak to this a little bit later, but Jen has also released a book called Shots from the Heart. It's 238 pages of photographs and journal excerpts from her travels, both near and far. The book and selected prints are available on her website, which is iowaclimberjen.com. In addition to being featured here, she's also been featured in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, the Des Moines Register, KWWL, KCRG, and NPR. So with that, I would love to welcome Jen Loeb. All
Hi.
right. Hey, Jen.
Hi. Hey.
Glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Jen, the last that our Capital City Pride audiences heard from you was a few years ago, right after Everest. And I mean, wow, Mount Everest, that's huge. So for those who were able to join the first time around, catch all of us up to speed. Share your experience in scaling the highest mountain on Earth.
Sure. I'd love to walk you through some photographs. We could get those up, and I'll kind of walk you through like the process of how I went about doing it and what it looks like and what it feels like. And then, you know, I'll zip through that pretty quick, and then I'll show a little video at the end of that's actual footage of me climbing on Everest in 2016. And then we'll open it up for questions. So if we could get the pictures going. Can you hear me okay?
Coming through clearly.
Okay. So this is what it looks like kind of in the foothills of the Himalaya. In 2016, I flew out of Iowa on March 31st. And from there, it takes about a day and a half or 2 days to get into Kathmandu, Nepal. And once you get there, you know, there's a lot of really cool, fun things to do in Kathmandu. So, you know, you can kind of hang out and just see some sights, and there's some cool temples and things to see. And then when you get ready to actually start your climb, you take another flight out of Kathmandu, and it's like a 45-minute flight, and you'll end up in Lukla, and that is the start of your trek to Everest Base Camp. So it takes about 10 days to trek to Everest Base Camp, and we could cover the distance faster, but we are intentionally going slowly. Like it's planned out, because you have to give yourself time to acclimatize, because as you're getting closer to base camp, you're getting higher up in altitude, and so you can't go too high too fast. Otherwise, you increase the odds of getting really sick from the altitude. So we started trek in Lukla, and that is right around 9,000, a little over 9,000 feet above sea level. And when you start there, it looks a lot like this. It's very green, it's very lush. And these are some bridges, actually, some span bridges that you walk across. There's a little river underneath that. And yeah, so it's very pretty here. There's no roads, so you just have to walk in. So this is what it looks like from, like, I'm standing on the bridge and just looking down. And, all along the trek to Everest Base Camp, you'll pass these little villages, and it's really nice. They're very friendly. You can always stop in and get something to eat or drink. The people are very welcoming. And you can see this river. It has kind of a milky color to it, and that is because of all the glacial silt, because these are directly fed from the glaciers off the mountain. So moving right along, this is a village called Namche Bazaar, and it is getting up there. We're probably a little bit over 13,000 feet in elevation, and you can kind of see, like, there's some clouds there. So you're kind of moving up a little bit, and you can definitely feel the altitude already by here. But I love this little town. There's a lot of great restaurants and just coffee shops and bakeries. If you forgot any gear, there are some gear shops here that you can get, like another pair of hand warmers or mittens or whatever you need. But this is a fun little place to hang out. There's a lot of shopping. And so, yeah, it's kind of built in right on the side of this mountain, kind of like in a little bowl. So this is what it looks like when you're actually on the trail. And, excuse me, these are some rocks called Manny stones. And it's kind of hard to see, but they are prayers, and they're written in Tibetan. And so the monks can read all of these prayers, and they're usually prayers for things like good fortune, health, wisdom, peace, and prosperity, things like that. And so you always pass to the left. In this particular area, when you're in the Himalayas, the people that live there are the Sherpa people. That is the ethnic group, the Sherpa people, and they are Buddhist. And so, you kind of honor and respect their customs and their traditions. And so you always pass to the left of the prayer flags and the Manny stones and the stupas. And there's a lot of prayer wheels. And so, I always spin the prayer wheels because I figure I need all the help I can get. So I spin all the prayer wheels. And this is, like I said before, there's no roads in this part, just because the mountains are so big, and the landscape it'd be really a lot of work to get a road back in here. So, but you have all these villages and all these people living in these villages, and so supplies need to get back there somehow. And how they do it is one of two ways. So they can either fly it in there with helicopters, which is really expensive, or this is how most goods get transported in the Himalayas, and that is just with porters. And so you can see this man here. He is a porter, and he has loads of, I can see, coffee and tea and things like toothpaste and clothes and stuff to drink, shoes, just anything people need in the village. Like, it has to get back there somehow, right? And so you see these guys carrying these massive loads. These are super heavy, right? And they just fly right past you like you're standing still. They're so strong. And then later on, like, you'll see them, they're taking a little break and they're smoking a cigarette, and then they they'll finish their cigarette, and then they'll pick up their load and fly past you again. But yeah, this is what this man does for a living. Okay, so this photograph, you can see the vegetation is starting to kind of thin out a little bit. There's still some green, but not much. And in the distance, way in the back, you can start to see some really massive snow-capped peaks. And, in the foreground here, this is the trail to Everest Base Camp. And these animals here are called zokyos. And it's a cross between a yak and a cow. And they use these animals to transport goods back and forth from Lukla up to Everest Base Camp. And so, it's just kind of rush hour traffic on the trek to Everest Base Camp. So on the way to Everest Base Camp, we will actually stop in this village called Pengbashe. And there was a man here, and his name was Lama Geshe. And not the Dalai Lama, but he was a very high-ranking Lama. And I had the great privilege to visit with him twice. And unfortunately, he has passed away a couple of years ago. But I feel very blessed that I got to meet him and hang out with him. And so when you're passing through the village where he lives, you will take a little detour up to his house, and we will meet with him. And like I said before, like, the Sherpas are Buddhist, right? So they believe that the mountains that we are trekking through and climbing on, they're actually holy. Like, we are trekking all over their holy land, and they believe that their gods reside in these mountains. And not only are they gracious enough to allow us to climb their holy lands, but he's actually giving me a blessing. And so we go to his house and we get a blessing, and he is saying, he goes through a bunch of prayers. He has a bunch of cards that he will go through his prayers and ask us to be granted safe passage through his holy land. And so we will sit with him and have tea, and he will go through his prayers, and he's burning juniper, and every once in a while, like, we'll throw rice in the air. And then when he's almost done, we'll go up and kind of bow before him, and he'll put that cloth around my neck, and it's called a kata. And then he will actually, as I'm bowed over, he will come up and bump his forehead to my forehead. And it's just a blessing. And this is actually one of my favorite moments of the entire expedition, just, being there and being in his presence. And I can't understand a word he's saying, but, it's a really special moment in my life just to get a blessing from Lama Geshe. Okay, so we're not to Everest Base Camp yet, but we are getting pretty close. And the green things we have left behind. The Zokyos have gone up to Everest Base Camp, and they've dropped their loads. You can see here their saddles are empty. And just all you're going to see now is just big, big mountains and snow and rock and ice. and it's beautiful, but it's also, in a way, it can be kind of harsh. Okay, so I am in a village called Tengbashe. There's a monastery here, and you can actually go into the monastery while they're doing their service. It's actually really laid back. And I went in and I slip them, a couple of rupees, and they let me go up to the altar and light the butter lamps. So this is a really cool little village. And in the distance, you can see some massive peaks. So off to the right is a peak called Amadablam, and I went over and climbed that one in 2015. And then kind of in the middle, kind of in the clouds a little bit, is Everest. And so as you're trekking in to Everest Base Camp, you don't always really get a view of Everest because you're in the valley and your view is blocked because there's just other mountains in the way. But when you get here, you can really see Everest in the distance. And this is kind of a moment where for me, it's like, oh boy, this is really exciting and this is really terrifying. And oh my God, Jen, what are you doing here? Type of moment. So it's very cool. And it's everything that you just to see it in person. It's so huge. Like the pictures will never do it justice. Just, to be in that place and realize just how big these peaks are. Okay, Everest Base Camp, here we are. This is 17,500 feet, and that is already taller than anything in the lower 48. When you first pull into Everest Base Camp, you're going to be feeling the altitude, a little bit sluggish. Some people struggle with nausea and fatigue and trouble eating, trouble sleeping. Those are all symptoms of altitude, acute mountain sickness. So we'll pull in here, and this is going to be home for the next about 5 or 6 weeks, depending on when you summit. So, you kind of pull in here and you make yourself at home. Everybody has their own little tent, and you crawl in, and that's home. And, you're living on a glacier. This is just nothing but rock and ice and snow, and the glacier moves surprisingly more than you would think it moves, but it'll pop and crack and shift, and it's melting throughout the season. So, when you first get there, your tent is nice and level, and then as the season progresses, the ice underneath it is melting, so your tent will kind of start to sag a little bit, and you kind of prop things up after a while. But yeah, this is home, so it's beautiful there. So before you can climb in this Buddhist land on these holy mountains, you have to do what's called a puja ceremony. And so the Sherpas will look at their Buddhist calendar and they will find an auspicious day. They'll find lucky day, and the monks will travel to Everest Base Camp and they will perform this puja ceremony. And it's actually very similar to the blessing that I got with Lama Geshe. So they will go through their prayer service, and there's a lot of tea and snacks and beer and chang, and they're burning juniper again, and we'll throw rice in the air throughout the course of the ceremony. And these are actually a lot of fun. I kind of enjoy them. It's just a nice time just to sit and listen to the prayer service. It has kind of almost like a musical quality to it. And so at the end of the puja ceremony, they'll put up the prayer flags. So there's a lot of symbolism behind everything, and it's kind of cool when you start to learn about it. And then behind that altar there is Everest, the west ridge of Everest. So that's another look at the little altar where we do our puja ceremony. And, if you want, you can take your gear up there to get it blessed. If you want your ice axe blessed, or your boots, or your helmet, or anything blessed, you can take it up to the altar and the monk will bless your gear. So it's kind of cool. Okay, this is the whole thing. It's kind of hard to see when the photograph is small, but I will kind of describe it a little bit. That big river of ice, that is the glacier that I'm living on. It is the Khumbu Glacier. And you can't really see it in the photograph, but there's a whole bunch of little yellow and orange dots on the bottom left corner. That is Everest Base Camp. And then so the peak on the right is Nuptse, and then the peak in the center is Lhotse. And then in the very back, there's not really much snow and ice on it in this photograph, but in the very back is the summit of Everest on the left-hand side. So you can kind of see the south summit and then the true summit there. And I'm going to stay on this picture for a little bit because I'm going to kind of describe what happens here. So once the puja ceremony is over, at that point, then you can start climbing. Now you'll start doing your rotations. So there's 3 rotations. The third rotation is actually your summit push. So you will, hang out after the puja ceremony, get your gear organized, get some rest, get some food, stay hydrated. And then when you do your first rotation, you'll actually leave base camp in the middle of the night and go up to Camp 1. You can't see Camp 1 in this photograph. It's kind of behind Noopsie a little bit, but it's at the top of the icefall. So the icefall is the section where there's all the ropes and ladders going over these giant crevasses. It's really sketchy through there. As far as I'm concerned, it's the most dangerous part of the route just because it's so unstable. And so Camp 1 is at the very top of the icefall. And we go through it in the middle of the night because in theory, it's more stable in the middle of the night because it's frozen solid. Things have a tendency to fall apart during the day when when the sun comes out and it warms up, things start collapsing. So we go through in the middle of the night because there's less, hopefully, collapsing, although those ice towers can collapse at any time without warning. So you move through here just about as quickly as you possibly can. It takes about 5 to 6 hours to get to Camp 1. Camp 1 is at 19,500 feet. And when you first get there, you just crawl in your tent and, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. So you just go to bed. I mean, you climb straight through the night. So you're just going to sleep off the rest of the day and get up and eat a little bit. And then the next day, we'll go up to Camp 2, which again, you can't see in this picture. It's hidden. It's up the western coombe there. Off to the left a little bit, but you can't really see it. I'll have another photograph where we can look at the map a little bit. So Camp 2 is at 21,500 feet, and you're just going to hang out there for a night. You eat, you sleep, and you rest. And then the next day you get up and you go all the way back down to Everest Base Camp. So the reason why we go up and then come back down, it's called climb high, sleep low. So this is the acclimatization process. You can't just climb up high and stay there because that really increases the odds of you getting HAPE or HACE. And those are both 2 forms of altitude sickness that are fatal. And so when you go up there, you'll trigger your body to start adjusting, but you don't really recover at that altitude. So you go up high, your body will start to adjust to that altitude, and then you go back down so you can recover. That's the first rotation. The second rotation is, again, you will leave Everest Base Camp in the middle of the night. You'll go up to Camp 1, and then the next day you will go up to Camp 2. On the third day, you will actually go up to Camp 3, which is kind of in the middle of the Lhotse face. So that peak there that's kind of in the middle, there's a lot of ice on that shoulder that you can see. So kind of in the middle of that face is where Camp 3 is at. It's 23,500 feet. And so you're just going to hang out at Camp 3 just for a little bit, get some water, eat a snack, take some pictures, and then you turn around and go back down to Camp 2. And then the next day, you will go all the way back down to Everest Base Camp. So I'm blowing through this kind of fast. I make it sound like it happens very quickly, but by the time you've done your first 2 rotations on Everest, you've already been there for like a month. So this is a really time-consuming process. It involves a ton of patience. and there's really no shortcuts. You just have to do it this way. So if you've made it through your first 2 rotations and you're still in the game, you're still healthy, you're not injured, you're not at that point, you push. So at that point, we're back in Everest Base Camp. We're looking at the forecast, multiple forecasts, to try and figure out when are we going to go for the summit. So we were looking at our forecast. Those days had potential as far as a weather window. We're looking for low wind speeds. Like if it gets too windy, it's just too cold. It's too dangerous. And it can blow you right off the mountain if it's just too cold. You know, you'll just freeze to death is what happens. So the wind speeds were doable on the 18th and the 19th. So we thought, okay, we will put ourselves in position for that summit push on that day. And so we left like 4 days prior to that, right? Because you have to be in Camp 4 so you can start your summit push. So again, we left Everest Base Camp in the middle of the night. This time we blow right past Camp 1 and we will go directly to Camp 2. It's about a 9.5-hour push. So that's a long day. The second day, we will go from Camp 2 up to Camp 3, and now we're going to stay here. You're on the side of a mountain, you're clipped into fixed lines. It's relatively, it's not vertical, but it's enough of a slope that you really just don't unclip ever. And so there you can kind of see the map where Camp 3 is at, and then the altitude of these camps. So you'll spend the night at Camp 3. And now, for the first time, we are actually wearing our supplemental oxygen, our masks. And once you start them, you'll stay on them permanently. You wear them 24/7. So you'll eat with them on, you drink with them on, and you sleep with them on. So Camp 3, we spend the night there. By this time, a storm had blown in, and we are getting pounded. The wind is howling. The visibility is very poor. We get on our gear, all our warm stuff, and we start moving up to Camp 4 with our oxygen and our gear. So Camp 4, it takes a while because you gotta get past the yellow band and the Geneva Spur, and then when you pull into Camp 4, it was super windy. The wind was shredding tents, but we were lucky enough that our tents did not get shredded, so we had some shelter for the next couple of days. And when you get there, that comes with the knowledge that you are now in a place called the death zone. So the death zone is when you are 26,000 feet and above. Anything in that range is considered the death zone, and they call it that because at this stage of the game, there's just not enough oxygen in the atmosphere to sustain life. So that's why you wear the mask. But when you're there in your tent and you're like, oh, I'm in the death zone, this is game on. There's no margin for error here. You just cannot make a mistake. So we pull into Camp 4. We get into our tents, and at that point, you're just really resting. You're eating, you're trying to stay hydrated, and you're trying to conserve energy because everything you do here takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work, and you're breathing hard. And all that air you're breathing is really cold and it's really dry. So your throat will get really raw and you develop a cough, and they call it the Kumbu cough. And so, it's just, you're basically freeze drying your lungs and your throat. So you just kind of conserve energy as much as possible here. As far as the summit push, so the next day we will get up and we'll spend all day just hanging out in the tent. I'm trying to stay safe. I'm trying to stay out of the sun. I'm trying to rest, double check and make sure I have everything in my pack. And I want to conserve energy. I try and sleep a little bit if I can, because we are going to start the summit push tonight. So I'll try and rest as much as possible. We got up at about 8:30 in the evening, and we had a little breakfast. I had a little packet of instant oatmeal and a little mug of hot cocoa, and we're moving by 9:30. It's dark, it's cold, the wind is blowing. It's about -40, -50 degrees. You can, I mean, there's no atmosphere, right? So you can see all of the stars, and there's enough light that you can see this silhouette, and it's the outline of Everest. And you can already see this trail of lights up the mountain. And those are climbers already starting their summit push. And that is where I will be following here right now. You're leaving to go. And so at this point, it is full on, and you are moving, and you are hurting, and you are struggling, and it's putting one foot in front of the other forever. So I had asked them before we left, I said, "What time does the sun come up?" And they said, "Jen, sunrise is about 4:30 in the morning." And I said, "Okay." That was going to be my marker for how long we've been climbing, because it's dark, and really all I can see is my feet in front of me and the climber in front of me, and that's about it. um, and it's so cold, and I'm just trying to move. And so you kind of lose all sense of time and space after a while. It's kind of like when you go to the gym and you've been running on the treadmill, and you're feeling good, and you're like, oh, I must have run 5 miles on the treadmill already, and you look down and you've only been running for like 2 minutes, right? So you kind of, I needed an idea of how long I've been climbing. So, it's just putting one foot in front of the other forever. And then eventually it started to get lighter on the horizon. And I kind of always say this little prayer of thanks that when it starts to get lighter on the horizon, because things just seem safer when the sun comes out and I can see where I'm going, and I can see the mountain itself, and it just the sunlight's coming out. Yeah, I know where I'm going, and it starts to warm up ever so slowly. It'll start to warm up, and so 4:30, I saw the most gorgeous sunrise ever. This beautiful orange and yellows and reds and pinks um, coming up, and so at that point, okay, 4:30. I know that I've been climbing. Let's see, we started at 9:30, so I've been climbing for 7 hours. So that was kind of an idea that just gave me an idea of like how long I've been climbing. And so you just keep going. Eventually, we got to a place called the South Summit, and at that point, I knew exactly where I was on the mountain, and I knew that I was really only about an hour, maybe an hour and a half away from the summit. So at that point, I know, oh my God, I'm so close. I'm almost there. I can't see the summit because there's all these cornices and the ridge kind of blocking my view. But I know I am so close. And by then, you're just cold and tired and sore and hurting. But I know I have to keep pushing because I'm almost there. So uh, at that point, from the South Summit, you go across this knife edge ridge, and then you go up the Hillary Step, and then you're kind of on the back of all these cornices on this ridge. And then, I knew I was getting close, and so I would take a couple of steps, and then I would look up, and I didn't see it yet. And so I'd, take some more steps and look up, and I didn't see it yet. And I kept doing this over and over and over again. And then finally, I looked up, and I just saw a bunch of people standing around. And I thought, oh my God, that's it. That's the summit. I'm here. I made it. And so, and I made the last 10 or so steps up to the top. And then I sat down, and I wanted to just kind of soak that moment up. It took 12 hours to get to the summit. And so, I tried to take some pictures, but my camera batteries were frozen. So I just kind of, I stopped, and I took a drink of my frozen slushy water. And then I just looked around me, and I tried to make an impression of that in my brain forever. you celebrate, but you only celebrate a little bit because it's not over, not by a long shot. You're essentially halfway. So the top is halfway. And so, now you need to get off of this thing. And going down is kind of, it's, in a way, it's just as difficult. It's a different kind of animal going down because, the game changes a little bit when you're going down and you're already tired, hungry and dehydrated and hurting. And so, but the clock is ticking, right? You're going to run out of oxygen in your tank sooner or later. And so you don't really mess around. You have to move quick enough, because if you're out there and you do run out of oxygen, things turn tragic very quickly in that case. And so, we only spent, I would say, maybe 20 minutes to a half hour maybe at the top, and then you have to go. I mean, you just can't stay there forever. So you turn around, and then, it took another 5 hours for me to get back down to Camp 4. So all in all, it was a 17-hour day. And then at that point, you're still in Camp 4. So, it's a long ways down still. The next day, you get up and go from Camp 4 all the way down to Camp 2 in a single push. And then we hung out at Camp 2 for maybe a couple of hours, had a nice meal there. And then in the middle of the night, we got up and did the push all the way from Camp 2 back down to Everest Base Camp. At that point, that is when you celebrate because the climbing is over. You did it. You made it. And so, but at that point, we pulled into Everest Base Camp at probably 6:30 in the morning. And there, everybody's like cheering. They're like, "Yay, you made it!" But at that point, I was so exhausted and so sick and so tired. I crawled into my bed and in my tent, and I slept all day because it's just, when you walk that fine line, and it's a very fine line, and you walk it for a long time. And so at that point, I had made it, and so I just wanted to sleep. I was hurting pretty badly, so. Yeah, that's a picture of the ice fall there going through all those ladders, and they're just giant crevasses. And so this is a no-fall area. So that was a photograph I took from Camp 4. I'm in the death zone. I didn't really take any pictures up higher than that because if you think about it, like when I'm climbing, I'm wearing these big, bulky mittens, and I didn't want to take a chance of dropping my camera. And so you'd almost have to take your mittens off to even get the photograph, but like you're going to get frostbite if you take your mittens off. So I'm sitting in my tent here and there's no danger that I'm going to lose my camera. So I just, that was the view from Camp 4. And there's a Sherpa man standing there and he's just kind of looking out towards Everest Base Camp, and it's so far away. So there it is. There's the summit. And I was just really just enjoying that moment as much as I possibly could, which was, it's a lot to it's almost overwhelming. This photograph I took, I was actually on a different peak in Nepal. I was on a peak called Makalu, which is the 5th tallest mountain in the world, and it's actually right next to Everest. And so this was the view from Camp 3 on Makalu. And you can actually see Everest there off to the left. And then this is kind of the back side of Everest. So it was nice just to get a different view of a different angle of the mountain and all those clouds. You look out and you just see peaks and clouds. It's so surreal, So that's kind of what it looks like from the backside. And in that saddle there, between Lhotse on the left and Everest on the right, that saddle in that low part, that's where Camp 4 is at. And you can kind of see where the south summit is on Everest. But this is kind of the back side. So I was actually climbing from the other side. So I'm actually in this photograph way at the bottom. I don't think you can even see me. But this was on Makalu, and you can look over and you can see there's Nuptse and Everest and the Saddle and all those clouds. These peaks are so big, they create their own weather, right? So all these clouds, you can just really see them just kind of crash right up to the mountain, and then they just stop. Like they can't even get around the mountains, and it's all nice and clear on the other side. Okay. We got time for a video?
We do. And just to tee this up a little bit for us, Jen, can you talk about what we are going to watch now in this video here? I know the first time I saw it, I was a little scared. So prepare our audience just a little bit for what we are about
so this
to
is
see, if you
actual
don't mind.
footage of me climbing through the Khumbu Icefall on my way up to Camp 1. And so this is where all the ladders and the giant crevasses, a lot of them are. It's really sketchy climbing. And I am the one with the red backpack. Good, just out of breath.
Oh, really good. Got the top of the ice fall right there.
Okay, so.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's literally and figuratively breathtaking up there. Oh my goodness. um, some questions for you. One, thank you for sharing this with us. I mean, wow, what a journey. You've mentioned so much through here, the climatization process, something called the death zone, and just this idea of keeping one foot in front of the other and keeping going. So it sounds like this is an emotional journey as well. What goes through your mind as you make the long
so I'm
journey
really
up?
just focused the whole time. Mountain climbing is one of those activities where it forces you to be present. Like I can't worry about the past. I can't worry about what might happen. Like it forces me to stay in the moment and think about what I need to be doing right now. And it's like, okay, right now I need to put my left foot here. And right now I need to put my right foot here. And I need to breathe. And I need to make sure that I'm staying healthy and taking care of myself. And, that I ate some food and that I put on sunscreen and that I have all the appropriate gear on so that I don't freeze or get frostbite. And so, it's really just this constant, um, just effort to keep your head focused and in the game all the time. And I can't worry about all these other things of like what might happen and whether there's going to be rock fall or ice fall or bad weather or there's a million different things that can go wrong up there, right? So I just really have to focus on what I can control, which is my actions, and then I have to make sure that I'm doing that and just focus all the time. And I mean, you're up there for so long, you're up there for 6 weeks and 2 months. And so you kind of, it's long enough that you're kind of going to go through the entire emotional spectrum. There's going to be moments of despair and there's going to be moments of frustration and there's going to be moments of just pure joy and, oh my God, this is beautiful and I'm here and I'm doing this and how amazing that I get to at least try. And so, but really, if you're
Yeah.
going to try and pull it off, you just got to keep your head in the game the whole time. You got to stay focused.
So to that point, knowing there's so much to be able to do and account for, how do you keep yourself motivated?
Well, I
It's
mean,
got
when
to
your
be
life is
tough.
on the
How do you
line,
do it?
that's a pretty good motivator. Because like you're just in this
Sure.
environment where there's just no margin for error. Like you have to stay focused and do the right thing. And this was a dream of mine to go there and try and see if I can do it. And I dedicated my life to getting there and training for it and doing, it took 3 years to put this single expedition together on top of all the other expeditions that I was doing. So this was my goal, and I decided that if I'm going to do this, it has to be complete dedication. It has to be 110%. And there's, you're in such an unforgiving environment that if you don't give 110%, Mother Nature doesn't care, and it can be ruthless, people, and that's how people just get hurt or they don't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, for that. I mean, what an incredible account too. And we have had audience questions come in, but before we get into that, let's lean a little bit into this training, and let's bring Kayana in on this conversation.
Those photos were breathtaking, just gorgeous. And it was actually really fun listening to you talk and reflect on your experiences, because as you do so, I think we as the viewers can just hear the joy in your voice that you had while being on the summit, as you're just sharing those photos with us. But as we move from the mountaintop back to Iowa, we were kind of chatting about this a little bit before we started, just kind of what goes into climbing up a mountain when you're from the flat Midwest. So could you just tell us what it's like, how you get ready for a climb, what training goes into this?
So my life here in Iowa has kind of gotten to the point where like this is my life. Like it revolves around my training, my nutrition, and getting sleep. And so, when I'm preparing for a big expedition, I will sit down and I don't have a coach and I don't have a personal trainer. Because I don't know anybody that's actually doing this in Iowa except for me. I mean, there are a couple of guys that I know that climb mountains, but they don't live near me here in Iowa. So I kind of just sat down and I'll design my own training program, and it'll be, maybe it'll be like a 5-month program or 6-month program. And I'm always training. Like I train year round. Like I never really stop training. And when I'm actively getting ready for an expedition, it's gonna be a lot of running. It's gonna be a lot of work on a Stairmaster. I'm trying to kind of mimic that climbing movement, and that's about as close as I can get, to climbing in Iowa on a regular, like just endless steps up, right? So I'm mimicking that kind of movement. I'll do some biking. I will lift twice a week, and in the rest of the time, so I'll work out like 5 or 6 times a week, and 2 of those days will be cardio, or 2 of those days will be lifting. The rest of the time it's cardio. I have a sandbag in my backpack, and I will go hiking with that, or I'll get on the Stairmaster with that and just go for hours. And I tell people, like, I train like my life depends on it, because like it literally does.
Right. Speaking of, as your life depends on it, every sport has a risk of injury. What have you had to overcome in order to realize your goal of climbing these 7 summits?
So, I mean, there's always, when you're training all the time, I have a tendency to get overuse injuries, whether it's like plantar fasciitis or something. But here, it would have been last year. So last year I was out skiing in Colorado, and I did end up making a turn, and I blew the ACL in my knee. So I had to have surgery to get that fixed, and that was a long recovery period. So, I really have been fortunate in the mountains that I'm still in one piece. I still have all my fingers and toes, and really just one injury in the last 10, 12 years. That's not bad, but it's kind of, it is frustrating. I'm not gonna lie. I don't. I like to move and I like to be busy. And anytime something kind of slows me down or gets in my way, it's a lesson in patience for me.
Right. So with that being said, talking more about that frustration, when you experiencing that one injury, when you train then, do you try to push through it, or has it changed the way that you decide to train then?
The knee injury
Mm-hmm.
or injuries.
The knee injury.
The knee injury, I'm treating that one a little bit differently than I have like a normal overuse injury. Like tendonitis is one thing, but a blown ACL is a completely different kind of injury. So with this, I've really had to just kind of take a break and be patient and actually let the knee heal so that I can get back in the game. So I'm treating this quite a bit differently than I have any other overuse injury I've ever had, because this is, this one you can't just plow through quite so much.
Right. Not quite like a bounce back, but more
Yeah,
healing.
no, this is, and I'm not really a spring chicken anymore, so it takes a little bit longer to heal, and I'm a little bit slower than I want to be, but I'm still in the game and I'm still gonna keep going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for this portion, we're going to just have, if you all have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it back to you, Mark.
All right, thank you. I have some questions that have already come in. I'll be honest, both my email and my texts have been blowing up since we've started. Jen, just to give you some of the questions we have here, one specifically, did you have to pack food for each camp? And what did you eat when you were climbing Everest?
Okay, so that's a good question. I get a lot of questions about the food. So when you're in Everest Base Camp, you're there for so long. You're there for 6 weeks, right? And it's not just you. You have it's a city of people, right? There's climbers there from all over the world. But in our team, we have climbers, we have guides, we have porters, we have cooks, we have people running around taking care of logistics. And so all those people have to eat. And so all the time, every day, there's people just streaming in and out of Everest Base Camp, just bringing food and supplies, drinks, whatever we need. And so they'll have an entire cook tent and a full kitchen with all the gear and all the stoves and the gas for all that stuff. So, the food in Everest Base Camp is actually really good. I mean, they kind of go above and beyond. It's just like eating at a restaurant every night, only the air is really thin and really cold. And,
Wow.
so the food is really good. Once you leave Everest Base Camp, there's not much at Camp One except for tents, a couple of tents, and that's it. And it's just kind of you're just really passing through. You don't stay there very much, and so we might pack a little stove and just some rice or pasta, something that's going to give you a lot of calories, and it's very simple to make. Like all you have to do is boil water, right? And it's nutritious enough that you can get the energy that you need to keep going. And so
Wow.
lots of like hot cocoa and coffee, or energy drinks, like little sports drinks. Once we get to Camp 2, so that is a little bit more of an established camp. So it's kind of like a much smaller version of Everest Base Camp. So you're going to have a guy there, and he's preparing food, and it's going to be like, we'll have like chapatis, which is kind of like it's a bread, kind of like a tortilla, only a little bit thicker. So you have like chapatis and eggs and bacon and the rice and pasta, and they'll take some vegetables, and you actually eat pretty decent at Camp 2. Camp 3 and 4 are quite a bit different because you're not staying there very long, and it's really hard to like lug all that stuff up the mountain. So it's going to be small stoves and stuff you can just boil, and hot
Wow.
cocoa. Like I can boil water and get hot cocoa, breads, dried fruit and cheese and chocolate, um, some granola bars. By the time you get to that point, like you're cutting like you don't take anything heavy in your pack, and you're not taking anything extra at all. Like what's in
Wow.
your pack, because you don't want that weight, right? You don't want to carry that weight up the mountain. And so, um, yeah, some beef
How
jerky.
heavy how heavy is that pack? We had that question come through as well.
So, so on summit day, my pack is actually not that bad. I have my oxygen canister, and that weighs, what's it weigh? Like 8 or 9 pounds. I think my oxygen canister weighs. And then, like, there's really not much else in my pack because I'm wearing everything. So, I have on my mittens and my goggles and the boots and the ice axe, and I'm just wearing everything. So really all I need in my pack is maybe another set of hand warmers, um, my camera, batteries for my camera. I actually had my water bottle stuffed down the front of my parka because I was trying to keep it close to my body so it wouldn't freeze solid. So my water bottle is shoved down the front of my parka. I did have a thermos with some hot tea, and that was in my pack. So, all told, pack weight probably maybe 10 pounds, 12 pounds,
Hmm.
not much. You really cut anything extra.
Oh,
And it's only 12 pounds, but it feels like a ton of bricks.
yeah. To that point here, you're thinking about the food you have, what you get to bring with you. A question that I received via text is, what are some of the things you have to plan for that you wouldn't think twice about when you're not climbing a mountain? What do you have to be really conscious about?
Um, Everything. I
I'm
mean, just
sure.
just everything. Like you can't forget anything because like if you do, like it's not like you can run to the 7-Eleven on the corner and go get it, right? Like there's just nothing there. So you have to, you can't drop anything. Like say I take my mittens off to adjust my goggles or to get something out of my pack. Like you can't drop a mitten, right? Because now if you drop a mitten, that's it. You're gonna have frostbite on that hand, and now you have one hand, and now you're climbing with one
Wow.
hand, and like now you need to figure out how to get down the mountain with one hand. And so there's you just have to be very conscious of your surroundings, and you can't drop anything. You can't, even if you're gonna get something out of your backpack while you're climbing, like you have to make sure that nothing falls out of your backpack, because if it does, it's just going to go sliding right down the mountain and it's gone. You're never going to find it.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
just a very conscious effort to, like, every move you make has to be very deliberate, and just no mistakes.
Yeah, the stakes are high up there. We actually had a question from YouTube that came through asking, is it difficult or dangerous to pass by other climbers going the opposite direction between Camp 4 and the summit?
Yes, it is quite dangerous. It's actually really hard work to try and maneuver around people, because by then you're on the fixed lines all the time. And so you're clipped in. You have 2 points of I'm clipped in with a Jumar and a carabiner. And so in order for me to maneuver around somebody, like, we have to stop and we have to reach around each other. I have to unclip and then clip in behind this person or in front of this person. And then a lot of times they will even just grab your carabiner and clip you in, because I can't really see it if it's in front of them. And then you'll step to the side, walk ahead, and then step back over on the in the line, and then clip in with your Jumar. And so it's hard work and it's tricky to try and maneuver around. And once you get closer to the summit, there's quite a lot of that because there's already people that have summited. Now they're coming down. There's still parties going up. And so you kind of, it's like trains on a train track. And so, you're trying to get past each other. And sometimes if you're already summited and you're on your way down, you can just wait and you let the party that's still heading towards the summit, you can let them pass and then you go. So you kind of take turns a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot of juggling things around to try and, and it's really time consuming and it's dangerous and it's you burn a lot of oxygen just kind of standing around waiting.
Wow. So brave. Even just watching that video, I was like, I can't do it. So I can't even imagine. But Jen, we do have some more questions, but I'm going to transition back over to Kayana here, and we're going to take this into a little bit different of a direction. So Kayana?
So we're going to be moving to more sort of the intimacy with identity. You are a woman, you are a lesbian, a Midwesterner. What does it mean to you to be your unique self in this sport?
So I have met other lesbian climbers, not so much in the mountaineering aspect of climbing, but more like I've met some that were rock climbers. But for me personally, like when I show up on an expedition, my objective there is, and all of my teammates have the same objectives. Like we're all there for the same reasons, right? We're there to climb, we're there to have fun, and we're there to explore and see new things and experience new cultures. And so what I've found as being a woman and as a lesbian, like as long as you're a good climber, nobody really cares. Like, and so, and as long as you're fun to be with and you're having a good time and you move well on the mountain, you know what you're doing. And like, I can show up and if I'm prepared and I'm fit and I'm ready to go and I'm having fun, that's it. Like, that's what really everybody's after, right? We just want to, we want to, climb this mountain. And if we get to the top, bonus. If we have fun, that's what we're there for. And so, a lot of times, and I find too that it varies a little bit with whoever's on the climbing team with me. Like the vast majority of people that I've climbed with have actually been super cool. But if you think of climbers as a general rule, and this is a broad stroke, but they travel a lot, so they see a lot. They're typically pretty well educated and usually a lot more open-minded. So what I find is more often than not, if anything, what I'll see is somebody's just concerned about me being a woman and not being strong enough. That's usually what if there is a problem, that's usually what it is somebody's concerned that like I'm not strong enough or I'm not fast enough and then once we start moving, once we start climbing, and then like, oh, okay. Or somebody's going to be like, oh, Jen, you're the only girl. I thought you were going to ask me to carry your pack for you. And I'm like, why would I ask you to carry my pack?
Right.
And so then I'll just grab my pack and go. And then, once they see me moving, and they're like, oh, okay, let's go. And then, sometimes it's like, oh, I better move faster because I don't want to get shown up by a girl, type of that situation. So there have been times where I was the only girl on an expedition. And, really, as far as being a lesbian on the mountain, nobody really says a whole lot. We'll go around if I'm with new people, they'll be like, oh, what's your wife do? Or what's your husband do? And then they'll look at me and they'll be like, Jen, do you got a girlfriend? And I'll be like, nope, I'm single. So they know, and they're letting me know that they know. And that's all there is to it. And as long as, and everybody's so chill about it and pretty relaxed about it. I really have not had a lot of problems. I do have to be careful when I'm traveling, depending on what country I'm going to. More often than not, it's not an issue. But
Hmm.
when you are in foreign countries,
Right.
you have to follow their international laws, whatever country you're in. And so,
Is
but I
there research then for you in that area? Do you look up countries ahead of time for how to act, like proper etiquette when doing travels?
Yes, there is some of that. Actually, some of these places can be maybe a little bit more conservative as far as attire. Like, I'm not gonna go wearing shorts,
Mm.
or maybe not wear a hat. Um, just a lot of it. So much of it is just common sense. Um,
Hmm.
but as long as you're being appropriate and courteous and polite, you do realize that when you're traveling in a foreign country, people know that you're from someplace else, and more often than not, they know that you're from the United States. And so I know they're watching me as an American, and whatever I do is going to reflect back on the rest of America. And so
Hmm.
it's important for me just to, mind my manners and use common sense and be polite and be courteous and respect.
Absolutely.
If I respect that culture and their rules, it reflects back good. That looks good for the rest of America too, because
Mhm.
and you think about it when people come to the States and they're from someplace else, and you'd be like, oh, that person's from whatever country, and oh, that person is rude. Are they all rude?
Mm.
No, it doesn't. So I realize that when I'm traveling, it's important for me, like, people are judging me as an American, whether I like it or not. And so, I do have to respect the customs and the cultures and,
Right.
whatever the rules are. And sometimes if it's, so much of it is just common sense, really. Like, and it's never been an issue. I've never had a problem with anybody really saying much of anything. They know
Right.
they're there to climb anyway. And more often than not, people are very welcoming.
Hmm. Speaking of both culture and climate, and moving it back to the United States, one of our Facebook comments, to summarize, I'm going to read it here to you. She says, in today's social climate, I feel as if there's a disconnect between the climb up social awareness, mountain, and our ability to acclimate to the new heights that we are reaching. So the question that kind of follows this up is, using the mountain climbing analogy, how might you direct us within the LGBT community in moving upwards and acknowledging and learning about how to acclimate and journeying to new heights as a group altogether?
Okay. I would say break it down into smaller, manageable pieces. Like, when I'm climbing a mountain, like, you don't just do the whole thing in one chunk, right? Like, you
Yeah.
do it one step at a time, and you break it down into rotations, and you break it down into, I'm moving from base camp to camp one. So
Mhm.
here's a chunk, and this is what I need to do today to accomplish, to get closer to my goal. So I'll break things down into smaller pieces and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this.
Yeah.
This is my job for today. I'm going to move from camp 1 to camp 2. This is the gear I need. Here's the preparation. I got stuff to eat, stuff to drink. I'm going to wear sunscreen, and I'm always like focused on what I need to be doing right now.
Hmm.
And you can kind of get distracted about like all these things that might happen. There's all these things like we might get bad weather, or the mountain might fall apart, or I might get hit by rock and ice. And it's really exhausting if I start to worry about all these other distractions coming in. It's like, oh, there's all these things, but I kind of have to like get tunnel
Right.
vision a little bit and focus.
To summarize a little bit, kind of what you're saying is to really just focus on your portion of the mountain, dedicate to that, and just kind of like block out those things, those distractions around you.
Yeah, and break it down into smaller pieces and just chip away at it, one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. All right. I'm going to go ahead and give it back to Mark as we kind of tackle a new facet of the mountain, shall we say.
Yeah, thank you, Kayana. In our as we start to round out this conversation here, COVID-19 has changed the world, and I'm sure it's changed some things in your sport, in your life. Can you share with us, what this year has been like for you?
I was actually this fall, actually this November, I was supposed to go down to Antarctica and climb Vinson Massif. It's the last peak I have to do to finish the 7 summits. We had already paid the deposit. I had already bought the insurance, and we were starting to look at booking flights. And the wheels were already in motion, and we were getting ready to go. And because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes before you ever leave for an expedition. And so the wheels were already turning, and then COVID hit, and we're kind of watching things unfold a little bit to kind of get an idea of like what's going on, how severe is this, how widespread is this, is it going to affect travel, can we still get to Antarctica? And lots of questions and lots of unknowns. So we had a little conference call and with the rest of the team, and it's just closed. Like there's no travel. So, and to get down to Antarctica, that's a lot of travel involved to get down that far. There's a lot of different planes you got to get on, and so we, at that point in March, once things were really starting to explode here, we decided to just postpone our expedition from this November until November 2021. So hopefully November 2021, I will be on a plane down to Antarctica and finish the 7 summits. That's my goal. But yeah, so this year, there hasn't really been any travel. I haven't gone anywhere. I haven't done anything, which is so abnormal for me. I'm usually like my life revolves around going to these far-flung places and how do I get there and what do I need and how do I train? And so this year has actually, in a way, it's given me an opportunity to just stay home and focus on things here. My life, my Iowa life, my Iowa life is very different than my climbing life. It's like I have 2 different lives. And so I'm focusing on my Iowa life and trying to, take care of the house and work.
Yeah.
Just I feel like a little homebody, but it's kind of nice to actually get some things done around here for a change.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Jen, thank you for that. We have some final questions coming in from our audience members, and we also have just some what I'll call some lightning round questions for you, just to get some of your personal take here. So, some of our final questions from our audience members here. We have one that's come in that is around some of the difficulties in the climbing, and a little more maybe on the macabre side here. Do climbers need to pass by climbers who maybe didn't make it off the mountain?
Okay, so I get this question a lot. There are bodies on Everest, depending on where you're at on the mountain. Once you get up to a certain altitude, like you just can't get them down from that location.
Sure.
It's just not physically possible. And so there are bodies on the mountain. I've seen bodies, but not on Everest. They've all been relocated to maybe further off the trail, or they've been covered with rocks and given kind of a mountain burial, just out of respect for that climber and the other climbers that are there. And so yeah, there's bodies on the mountain, but I didn't see any just because they've been buried or relocated.
Sure. Yeah. We have another question here that is around your favorite mountain. This particular question is around mountains in Colorado. So two questions. What would be your favorite mountain in Colorado? And then maybe just in the world, since you've been all across the world.
My favorite mountain in Colorado. I would say, I really have not done a lot of climbing in Colorado. And people always ask me that, and I always kind of feel a little sheepish that I really haven't done that much climbing in Colorado. I need to just go out there and do some climbing. I don't know. I've done a lot of ice climbing in Colorado over in a place called Ouray. And so that I've done quite a lot of in Colorado. But as far as like climbing the 14ers in Colorado, I really haven't done that much of it. So
Maybe a goal.
Maybe I need to get on that. I don't know. But as far as like favorite mountains in the world, there's a peak called Carson's Pyramid. That was super fun. Just Google that one and check it out. It was super, super cool. And then I think that the other favorite one of mine was a peak called Ama Dablam. And that's another peak in Nepal, not that far from Everest. And it was again just a super fun climb, just the style of movement and just it's a really beautiful peak. You see pictures of that one all the time in magazines, and so every time I see it, I can like figure out where I was on the mountain, and it's just some beautiful lines.
Yeah. I had a question come through email. Did you ever get sick when you were climbing up Everest?
I did. I actually got Giardia before we ever got to Everest Base Camp. I came down with Giardia, and that was horrible. It took it took some heavy duty antibiotics to get that under control. And everybody gets a little bit of the acute mountain sickness, your fatigue and nausea and headache and trouble eating, trouble sleeping. So I had a lot of that. But I didn't talk about HAPE and HACE very much. HAPE is high altitude pulmonary edema, and HACE is high altitude cerebral edema. And both of those, if your acute mountain sickness progresses to either one of those, that can be fatal, and you're really in trouble at that point. And I did not get those, but it's just a lot of fatigue, really a ton of trouble just breathing. Trying to sleep is really hard. Trying to eat, like I had to force myself to just shove food in my mouth and swallow it, because you just lose your appetite. So yeah, that was my sicknesses.
Of all places to be sick. Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. We have a question coming in through here. What is something you forgot to pack and wish you had?
Nothing. I didn't forget to pack anything. Like I have a check sheet. I have a list of stuff that, in packing for me is like, it's a massive undertaking, right? I'll have gear spread all over the house, and everything is like in little piles, and I'm checking off things off this sheet, and I'm double checking and triple checking, and just, and I kind of like, it takes forever, right? This is like, I'll take days off of work and just make piles of gear around the house. And, I'm running to the store to get more hand warmers and snacks, like a lot of snacks that I know I can eat at altitude. And so, so packing is really kind of stressful, because there's so much involved, and I know I can't forget anything. So yeah, I'll go through my check sheet and then go through it again, and kind of hee-haw around. It's like, oh, maybe I should pack another candy bar, or, maybe another Rice Krispie treat or whatever I need. I just kind of, but no, you don't forget anything. You just can't.
Wow. Just like you're so deliberate on the mountain, before the mountain is just as deliberate. So, yeah, a couple of questions here that might not be around your mountain climbing here. Where could we find you on a typical weekend?
At work. So, it's kind of, mountain climbing is turned into a full-time job, but I also have a full-time job. So it's kind of like I have two full-time jobs. And so I really don't have a lot of free time. I'm just kind of going all day, every day. The pace is, I'm moving every day, trying to get things done and take care of business. And so
Yeah.
I work a lot of weekends just to try and, this stuff gets expensive. So I'm trying to like make some overtime and pay the bills so I can go climbing some more.
Sure.
This weekend I will be hanging out with some friends. I'm going to do some kayaking, but the vast majority of weekends I'm working.
Nice, nice. In your free time, which sounds like there isn't a whole lot of it, but what volunteer organizations do you work with?
Oh, I work with a whole bunch of them, kind of doing a little bit of everything. So I've done quite a bit of work with Habitat for Humanity, American Hiking Society. I've worked at some of the various local animal shelters. I've worked with an organization called Earthwatch, Global Village. I'm all over the map with the volunteer stuff. I'm cleaning up rivers in Iowa. There's a thing called Project Aware, and we do river cleanups in Iowa. So I'm doing that. That's super fun. I love it. And every year they pick a different river, and so we just clean them up every year. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it this year because of COVID. But I try and focus on like either taking care of the environment or working with animals or building houses or building schools or doing research on endangered species. I'm building hiking trails. I'm kind of all over the place with the volunteer stuff. I like the variety.
It sounds like a lot of really good work goes into that free time that can be so sparse some days. So,
Yeah, and in a way, it's kind of almost more rewarding than the climbing because then I get to make a difference, and that to me is it's so important. Like climbing, you're just focused on having a good time and being there and trying to get to the summit.
Yeah.
But the volunteer work, that's really means a lot to me to try and make the world a better place. While I'm here.
Yeah. Jen, our final question is really one for you to talk a little bit more about your book, Shots from the Heart. Do you mind sharing with our audience
Let me
a little bit more about it?
Yeah. Hold on.
Looks like we're going to get a preview of the book itself as well, which is quite exciting.
Okay. So this is the book. It's Shots from the Heart. So it is 238 pages, hardback, full color, and it is available on my website, iowaclimberjen.com. So last year I needed a project to work on while I was recovering from my blown out knee. And, for years, people were like, Jen, do a book. And I was like, no. I really didn't want to do one. And then, I was on crutches and not really traveling and not climbing. And I had all this free time. And I thought, oh, I actually have time to sit and I'm home, which those are two things that never happen. And so I thought, oh, okay, now's the time to put a book together. So, I have thousands of photographs that I've taken over the years. And so I just sat down and started going through photographs and pulling out the ones that I thought were cool or that told a good story. And then I have all these journals too that I kept on all these expeditions. And so I went through, I found all the journals. That took a while. And I took excerpts out of my journals. So this is a book. It's a compilation of photographs and journal excerpts from my travels. And some of it's climbing, some of it's volunteer work. I even put some pictures from Iowa in there because I'm an Iowa girl. I've lived here my whole life, and I think Iowa is underappreciated. Like it's this little hidden secret, right? Like it's really beautiful here, and Iowa always kind of gets this bad rap. And I wanted to put some pictures of Iowa in there to show people how beautiful it is. Really, like there's more to Iowa than corn and soybeans and cows. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
photographs and journal excerpts.
And
And
you shared that you can get that on your website, which is, again, iowaclimberjen.com. We have posted that on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube. Is there any other place that someone might be able to pick up that book?
there you can get them at Next Page Books. It's an independent bookstore in Cedar Rapids. I had some at Karma Coffee Cafe in Cedar Rapids. And I was trying to get them out more to different locations, and then COVID hit, and everything kind of went on the back burner. And I really haven't picked it up again. So for sure, you can get them at Next Page Books in Cedar Rapids and on my website. If you get them on my website, then I just ship them right to you, and you don't have to worry about masks or social distancing,
Sure.
whatever. So
Great.
yeah.
You know, Jen, we've shared your website here. How could someone best get in contact with you if there are further questions? Do you have a Facebook page or a preferred way that any of our audience members might be able to get in contact with you?
So I do have a Facebook page that's dedicated towards the climbing, and that is also Iowa Climber Jen. If you punch it all in as one word, my picture will show up, and it'll say athlete. Just hit like, and then you can follow that page, and that's where I'm posting updates of, hey guys, I'm climbing here, or hey guys, I'm in Bolivia climbing a mountain, or hey guys, I'm doing volunteer work in Cambodia. So I'm kind of, that's where
Wow.
I'll post my travels and updates of where I'm at and what I'm doing. And when I go for the 7th summit, when I head down to Antarctica, I will be posting updates on that Facebook page saying, okay, guys, I'm in Antarctica and here we go.
That's awesome. So that's Iowa Climber Jen right on Facebook.
Yep.
Jen, thank you for being willing to share. What an incredible journey that you've shared with us and our audience. And part of our mission at Capital City Pride is to tell stories, and yours is one that I hope a lot of people out there, Iowa and beyond, can really be inspired by. And we appreciate you joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you. So with that, I'm going to have Kayana come back on the line here. We have a few other things, and we're going to close out our latest installment of the Capital City Pride speaker series. So Kayana, come back on.
All right. Thanks again, Jen, for joining us. And I just wanted to thank everyone as well for being here. It was just a lovely discussion. Glad to have you all. That being said, we are excited to share that our next event is our Storytellers event, taking place on October 8th. It's going to be virtually streamed at 6:30 p.m. from Teehee's Comedy Club. Our Storytellers event will feature 5 local diverse LGBTQ speakers, and we encourage you to head out onto our website, capitalcitypride.org for more information.
Yeah, and as always, just keep your eye out on our Facebook, all of our socials, as we spotlight our upcoming events, including our upcoming Pride Stride, which we're participating in. It's a nationwide event. And our final speaker series of 2020 is taking place in November. We're going to be featuring an intersectional speaker. Her name's Jackie McCormick. She's LGBTQ. She's an acclaimed athlete. She's a member of the Nez Perce tribe, and she runs Rise Above, which is an organization used to help promote wellness on reservations through basketball. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe and take care of each other. Yeah. Thank you, Kayana.